Hey everyone, it is late at night and I am Norman. Tonight we're looking at 3 different watches that all have one thing in common. Even though 2 of them are homages to 2 completely different watches, and 1 is the real deal. What do these watches have in common? Let's find out. Okay, so what do all of these watches have in common? This is the vintage Tudor, the real deal. So this and the other 2 watches we're looking at all have cases in common. So I'm pretty sure that this is an Oyster case. I don't think it went by a different name back when this was produced, but at that time, Tudor actually used Rolex parts. I think the major difference was the movement inside them. So for example, this has a Rolex crown, which I paid for because the original one, the threading had worn out. So I had the crown and threading replaced. Oh, there we go. Oyster case by Rolex. So this is what vintage Oyster cases looked like, and look at how thin that is. It has the round sides. The bezel, yeah. That is an example of an authentic Oyster case from the 50s or 60s, whenever this was produced. Now we're going to look at 2 homages to 2 different watches that have cases inspired by these. First up is a watch that I've recently done first impressions of and was the inspiration for this video. So when I received the Tresca commuter, I knew that I would want to put it side by side with the Everest. Spoiler alert, that is the 3rd watch we're looking at tonight. My impression of this watch was that it's actually thinner than the Everest. But is it? And of the 3 watches, this one is the most unique. The brand has chosen to brush the top surfaces of the bezel and the lugs, only keeping the sides polished. But you can see the same rounded shape. However, look at this. The Tudor is so much thinner. And I feel like that's part of the appeal of vintage watches and actually vintage furniture as well. It's so thin my camera doesn't really want to focus on it. But yeah, I have a mid-century dining room table and its legs are thin and dainty. Same with the chairs. They're not big and clunky. And I feel like most contemporary furniture and watches and whatnot are just a lot chunkier. It's interesting. But this case is quite thin. But is the commuter thinner than the Everest? I was a little bit shocked to find out that not really. They are very similar in thickness. And maybe that impression is due to the bezel here. You can see how low profile that is. When we look at the Everests, there's a sharper angle to that bezel. So it kind of gives the watch a thicker impression. And actually they polished the lugs on the Smith's Everest. However, the bezel is polished. There's that same rounding on the sides of the case. And look, there's a crown on the crown, but it's a different crown. It's the Smith's crown. But yeah, both of these watches are brilliant homages. And I like some of the finer details. I really like the gilt dial on the Smith's Everest. And I like the brushed bezel on the commuter. And the slightly more dressy aesthetic of the watch that this is homaging, but these are both brilliant. The Tresca has what appears to be shorter lugs, and the Tresca is smaller. It's 34 millimeters, but you can see it doesn't look drastically different from the Everest. So yeah, it's interesting to see two other brands' take on this particular case, albeit those are more contemporary variants of the Oyster case. But this is one of the old school. Very cool. There you have it, two brilliant homage watches and one that is vintage, but the real deal. Thanks for watching.